Going to talk about some of the basics of HTML, and those primarily are some of the basic tags that we use. Don't worry, we'll get to the gist of it. I think like this is probably going to be the last video on some of the basic introductions. I'm going to move to the CSS introduction. I'm going to talk about like what CSS is, some of the basic styling properties there as well, and then the next thing we'll do is we'll just create a quick website or a quick design, probably some of my designs or something else, or we'll just pick up some other design on the internet. So what are some of the basic HTML tags? Well, let's just continue where we left off. So some of the basic HTML tags, I've already talked about them, but since we're just talking about like some of the visuals, I'm going to talk about some of the other tags that we can use. So in terms of tags, some of the most useful ones are a div, an anchor tag, a button, some of the input fields, some of the other ones would be footer, header, section, so on and so forth. So I'll just start with one of these at a time. What is a div? You can consider a div to be a container. It can just be a container. It has no styling applied to it apart from some of the basic ones like display block, so on and so forth. Now I will obviously let you know what display block, display inline, so on and so forth, like what these things represent when we get to the CSS part. But you can consider a div to be simply be a container in which you can put elements. So for example, if I go here and I just place like ASD or whatever, and then if I just refresh it, you can see obviously the text is represented here. Similarly, I can have another div and I can add something to it as well. Now, what's the difference between these two things? So as you can see, first of all, obviously these two things look really simple, but these one important thing to note is that these are coming above one another. Now, if I were to just write line 1 and then line 2 like this, and if I refresh, you can see, okay, line 1 and line 2 are coming on the same line, yet because both of these things are actually wrapped in a container, a div container, it actually separates these out into separate lines. Now, one important thing I actually want to highlight is the inspector tool. So with the inspector tool, let me just like Command Z it. So how do you actually access the inspector tool? Well, you can go right click on the Chrome window and you can say view page, inspect, and then obviously it's going to open the inspector tool, which you can use to inspect some of the elements here, so on and so forth. There are obviously other shortcuts to open it. One shortcut is Command Option I or Command Control Option I, I'm guessing on Windows, and then the other one is Command Shift C. What Command Shift C does is it actually selects this tool, which allows you to select an element on the page to inspect it. I would advise you, anytime you're trying to inspect anything, just press like Command Shift C and then just hover over things to actually see what's going on. So if I hover over these items, you can see this is a div. This is the structure basically that's written on the right hand side. I can also zoom this for you guys to see. And it has some basic styles. The basic style that actually gets added to the browser, added by the browser to this div tag, is that it's display block. Now display block means that it is a block level element, and block level elements just span the complete container or span the complete width, and they don't appear inline. Now if I wanted to make like all divs inline as an example, I could say div and then display inline. Now that's going to make these divs or these containers, you just consider them divs, inline, which necessarily isn't the case, but you can do that with CSS if you want. Now this is a really important thing because it helps. It doesn't have like any major styling applied to it by default, and you can style it in various ways, similar to how you can do it with any other element. And you can obviously place like other tags within the div, like heading, paragraph, anchor tags, so on and so forth. Now, some of the other tags that are important are the p tag. The p tag is a paragraph, which is quite simple. It's just a paragraph. There's nothing more complicated about it. Now if we inspect it, you can see like there's some margin applied to it, and these are all CSS properties, but all of these tags have some sort of like basic styling applied to them. Similarly, we have the anchor tag. Now this anchor tag is important because it allows you to link to second page. If I were to say something like that. Now this is a link to a second page. We don't have a page created, but let's just go ahead and create a separate page. So I'm gonna Command Shift S to actually duplicate this file, and I'm gonna say second page .html. Now this is the second page. We have this created, and I'm also gonna open the index file. You can press Command Shift P to obviously have a bunch of options like formatting options that exist in VS Code, and Command P to open and search for files in the project. Currently, obviously, these files live in the desktop folder, but once we actually create like a larger file structure, you would be able to easily search files by pressing Command P. Now, this is the first page, and I can just basically say, anytime you, let's say, open a tag, an anchor tag automatically adds an href property. This is a hyperreference property, contains a URL that you can reference to, or you can point to it. So now I can say, okay, second page, and it automatically autofills it, and I can say, okay, second page.html. If I do this, if I refresh now, if I inspect, you can see this link has a link to the second page. Now I'm gonna go to the second page, and I'm gonna say h1 second page, and then link to first page. And similarly, I'm just going to link the index page on the second page link. Now if we just go ahead and click this link to the second page, now as you can see, like, this is the second page, and I can go to the first page like this. Now this is just basic linking, but probably one of the most important features of HTML here. Some of the other things that you can obviously have are buttons. So I can say press me, and this is a basic button. Obviously it doesn't have anything applied to it, but you can obviously style it in different ways. Similarly, you can have an input field. You can also add a placeholder property to it, enter your name, and if you refresh, okay, here's the placeholder. I also want to go ahead and like apply a div tag around it just so it appears in a separate line. The other tag, as you can see, like, all of these things are squished together, and a way to actually give some spacing without CSS would be to add a BR tag. This is a break tag which adds a line break between multiple items. So as you can see, like, there's no break between the link to the second page and press me. Now if I were to just, let's say, move it upwards and just refresh, you can see that there's a line break added. And if I want to add like a lot of spacing, I can add like multiple ones, and it's going to add more spacing. Similarly, I can go here and I can add these, and it's going to give some spacing. We don't usually give spacing like this. This isn't really a good way to do to add spacing. We can obviously add spacing with CSS. So the purpose of the primary purpose of a break tag, you can consider it to be, like, for example, if you have a long paragraph, like this is a long paragraph, but I want to break it here and then go to the next line or something along those lines. Imagine we did something like this. Now if I, let's say, refresh this page, so you can see everything's actually coming in the same line, despite the fact that I've actually actually placed this particular text on a separate line in the HTML file. But that doesn't happen because the paragraph tag just doesn't work like that. So I can go here and I can just add a break, and it's gonna again break the formatting in the way that I want here. Another way to actually accomplish the same thing would be to use a pre-tag. So the pre-tag, actually, as you can see here as well, is a block of pre-formatted text in which it actually observes the structure that I type here. So I can go ahead, this is another line. Now if I, let's say, refresh it, you can see obviously the pre-tag has its own custom styling as well, but it's actually respecting the styling that's there. It's respecting the spacing on the left, it's respecting the line break here, it's also respecting the line break here. So that's also one popular tag that can be used if you have a lot of formatting going on but don't really want to use BRs or breaks or anything along those lines. Now let's see what some of the other tags are there. So another tag would be a UL tag. A UL is an unordered list, and it contains list items. And by list item, you can have like item 1 and then item 2, item 3. So what this does is it obviously has an unordered list with the bullet points here, and you can configure the bullet points, the styling of the bullet points with CSS, but it basically generates a list of bullet points. Similarly, if you want numbered bullet points, you can do that with an ordered list, OL. And you can obviously, I'm just going to copy these three things to save time. You can do the same, and you can refresh, and you can see, okay, you get these items here as well. Let's see some of the other tags that may be used. So we have the button, canvas, site, call group, embed, figure, form. Some of these elements are important, but I wouldn't say like extremely important, but we'll definitely get to these as well. The image tag is definitely important. Let me see if there are any other important tags that I want to discuss here before we actually jump to our next exercise. I think obviously like the table tag is important, but I don't think like in modern, we don't really use tables that much, especially in web design. But if a table comes up in some of our web designs, we'll discover that. But for now, let's just look at one last tag, which is the image tag. The image tag, similar to the anchor tag here, takes a reference. Here it's like hyper reference, but here's it's a source. So I'm just going to drag this image here in the desktop folder so you can have a look at it, and I can just say basics. The title of the image is basics.png. I save it and then I refresh it, so you can see, okay, here's the image that I just added, and obviously it's like really big, so I can also configure the width by saying, okay, width is going to be 100%, and that's going to automatically adjust based on the sizing. I can also give it a fixed set of pixels, and that's also going to work. The other thing that you can do with images is you can obviously have an alternate tag here as well, which you can use to define the image. So it's going to be a cover image of learn HTML and CSS. So if I do that, you can see nothing visually changed, but the fact is that screen readers can now read it, the browser can read it, and let's just say if there's actually a mistake somehow in the source, let's say I just made a mistake, I added an S, it's actually going to show that the image obviously doesn't appear, but the alt text is there, so people can see that, okay, an image existed, and this was the image, but it's just currently not being fetched. Now, one other thing I'd like to point out is, just quickly, if let's say the images were sitting in a separate folder like this, if I just move the images to a separate folder and I just refresh, obviously it doesn't work right now, but if I wanted to access the image that exists in a separate folder, not in the same folder where my files are, I would basically say images / and then basic whatever. So the good thing about VS Code is it actually gives you the formatting stuff automatically built in. So I can, let's say, whenever I'm like opening this tag, like it actually gives me all the things that exist in this particular folder, and I can go images, and then I can say basics. I'm just pressing enter. I'm not even typing anything here, and it just automatically fetches the image. So I think like those are some of the most important tags that I think you guys need to be aware of. We're going to jump into CSS. We're going to move really quickly, and we're just going to start creating some really awesome stuff, and I hope to see you there. Take care.